Favor John, I don't know who's doing it.
Good to go on both.
Okay, welcome to the April 11th, 2022 Town of Ithaca Board Meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And town board members, welcome back to the Shirley Raffensperger Board Room. We'll talk at the end what the new situation is in terms of what's come out recently about allowing hybrid meetings. So let's wait and talk about that at the end of the meeting. If there's any questions, we'll start with persons to be heard. Are there, Paulette, I don't see any members of the public on Zoom that you can see who might want to address the board?
Excuse me. No, I don't. The Britons are here, but I'm assuming that they want to talk about this.
Public hearing.
Yeah.
Yep. Catch you later. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to the first of 4 public hearings. The first item is adoption of a local law adding and revising accessory dwelling unit definitions in Chapter 270 of zoning of the Town of Ithaca Code. I'll open the public hearing at 5:34. This has gone through the Planning Committee, and it really does update definitions related to both attached and detached units. So are there any members of the public who would like to address the board on revising the accessory dwelling unit definitions? I'll leave the public hearing open for just another minute. So you have the local law, the changes were sent out. I don't know if the planning, and then the seeker, there's also a seeker that we will be voting on, which there's a negative determination of environmental significance. So, Rich, is there, from a planning committee perspective, or Sue, anything you want to say about the changing definitions?
I just think this is more of a question for Marty, right? Were you trying to reconcile something that you felt? You can't hear me?
You really have to.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So Marty, I thought this was more or less your initiative. Am I incorrect in that assumption?
I believe it was actually initiated by a town resident that came and made the request to the planning committee. And then you heard what they had to say, and then you made a determination that we should slightly modify the definition of attached accessory dwelling unit based on what you had heard.
Okay, this happened a couple of years ago.
It was a little bit ago.
Yeah, I'm a little hazy on it, but there was a question as to what constituted an attached versus detached unit, and we had no definition in our code. Is that correct?
The definition really needed to be clarified a little bit more, just because of the loose aspect of what it had currently or was. So this tightens up the language and identifies how it is an attached ADU in comparison to what we had previously. So it's really a clarification within the definition that we already had.
Thanks.
Thanks, Marty. Seeing no members of the public addressing us on this topic, I'll close the public hearing at 5:36. So we first have a seeker resolution. Would someone like to move the seeker resolution?
I'll move that.
Is there a second? Pam seconds. Any questions or comments about the seeker? All those in favor, raise your hand. You can say aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand. It's unanimous. And then moving on to the resolution adopting the local law. Would someone like to move that resolution? Rob, is there a second?
Second.
Rich seconds. Questions, comments? And remember, you really have to talk
I
right
think
into the
this is good.
microphone.
I remember when there was a issue with zoning appeal where there was an ADU that was attached by a breezeway, and we couldn't figure out whether it was attached or detached. And this clearly defines it as detached because it was attached by an unconditioned walkway or breezeway. So it'd be detached.
Thank you, Rob. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Moving on to the second public hearing. This is adoption of a local law adding swimming pool location requirements. Basically saying they can't be in the front of the yard. And I will open the public hearing to see if anyone would like to talk about swimming pools at 5:38. Paulette, any members of the public that we might not see in the waiting room?
I do not see anyone in the waiting room or indicating that they wish to speak, and I haven't received any emails.
I'll leave it open just for a minute. So again, there's also a seeker attached to this. I really think this is as simple as not allowing swimming pools in the front yard, as I recall. Is that correct? Rich or Sue?
Yeah, there's also a setback requirement. And also, I think there was some, we also needed to make sure that there was compliance with the lakeshore setback in the lakefront residential zone. I think that's also in this amendment.
Thank you. Sue, did you want to add anything else?
Nope, all fine.
Okay. Since I will close the public hearing at 5:39, would someone like to move the negative determination of the seeker? Rich, is there a second?
Second.
Bill, questions, comments? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. And then moving on to the resolution itself, adopting the local law requirements in Chapter 270. Any questions, comments about this? Rich moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Bill seconds. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Moving on to the third public hearing. This is adoption of a local law amending Chapter 250 of the Town of Ithaca Code titled Vehicles and Traffic by revising penalties and exclusions in the vehicle weight limits article. I'll open the public hearing at 5:40. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board on this topic? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Britton.
Bruce Britton from Forest Home. I would like to speak in favor and thank you. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. This has been discussed at Public Works for a while. We did a fair amount of homework on it. So we appreciate, Joe, thank you for the work that you've done on this. As you see in the resolution, this came up partly, well, in large part because of issues in Forest Home. And we had to check signals to see what kind of penalties and what kind of exclusions were necessary to write or important to write into this. So does anyone have any question? Any board members have any questions about this? Would someone like to move the resolution? Rob, is there a second? I saw Eric's hand out of the corner of my eye, so Eric seconds. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. And then the final public hearing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. The final public hearing is regarding amending Chapter 144 to the Town of Ithaca Code titled Energy Code Supplement. This has been in the works for a while. We're not adopting the code tonight, but we're opening the public hearing at 5:42 to see if members of the public want to address us on this topic, or if board members have any questions. So do board members have any questions about the amendments to the energy code supplement?
I have a question. Why we are not adopting this one tonight?
We missed by one day what it had to be in terms of getting it out to the public.
Okay, thank you.
I think it was one day. Is that right, Paula? One day. So Paula, there's no members waiting to speak to us on this topic?
No, I do not see anybody wishing to speak, and I have not received any emails on this topic.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing at 5:43. For those, Bill, I think this was through codes, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Is there anything you want to say?
I believe Nick explained it to us at a prior meeting. Just to remind folks, this is to make some small changes because of the way our code relates to the New York State Energy Code, and we have to get permission from New York State. So if we're doing anything stricter, so this brings it in line with State Energy Code. And Marty, correct me if I'm saying anything wrong or if there's anything in addition. We are, talking to the city to see if they can make the same changes because, we tried to adopt our codes together so they'd be similar. So folks would have a similar code in the city and the town to work with.
Anything else? Any other questions? Any clarification about this?
I just think that Nick provided a summary in the seeker, I think, for this as well. So that would be a good place to go if you want a quick synopsis.
Thanks, Rich. So again, it was important for us to hold the public hearing tonight, so we have, but we will, this will be before you again in terms of actually passing the resolution at the study session. I think we're doing it at the study session. Yes, I saw a head shake. Yes. Okay, moving on. The next item is authorization for the supervisor to sign an agreement with Cornell University regarding water supply through the town of Ithaca Pleasant Grove interconnect. And this has to do with one of the the things that had to be in place as part of the North Campus residential expansion prior to the issue of building permits. Susan Brock works quite a bit on the agreement. You have the agreement as an attachment. I will first see if somebody wants to move the resolution. Pam, is there a second? Eric seconds. Questions or comments about the agreement? Rich, I'm trying to read your face. Is there a question there? Okay. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, Susan. Next is setting a public hearing regarding amendments to the Town of Ithaca Code 210 sewer rents in Chapter 261 water rates. The background information is you also were included in your packet is a water sewer high consumption refund policy, and which includes the process criteria to be considered and also a form that public would fill out if they're requesting a refund policy. There's been quite a bit of discussion about this in Public Works and also checking signals with legal counsel. So we thought it was time to bring before you what, once in a while there is someone who says, this is happening, I don't think I should pay my water bill. So we wanted to have written criteria for making a decision and not always have to bring it to a formal vote for the town board. It will still come to the town board, but sometimes if it's pretty straightforward, it will just be in the consent agenda. So I know that at least 3 board members are quite familiar with the new policy and the form, but we wanted to see if other board members have questions. And again, we'll be using today to set the public hearing. There's a couple of changes as it indicates in the resolution to the related to billing errors and refunds in chapter 210 of the sewer rents and billing errors and refunds to chapter 261 of the water rates. But Susan, I believe they're fairly straightforward. In fact, I think we included in your packet what the changes are, will need to be.
Yes, for the chapter 210 sewer rents, I think you have a red line version that shows the changes. There is no provision at all for refunds in our water rates chapter. So we would just add the same language to the water rates chapter that you would be adding to the sewer rents chapter.
You know, and I think that we've been informally doing this. It was just time to formalize this. I would say that 3/4 of the time, we would not be recommending any refund based on decisions we've made in the past. I saw Joe shake his head. So Joe, you think that's accurate? About 3/4 of the time, it doesn't really meet our criteria that we've listed.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, Rod. If it meets the criteria, I think it would streamline right to the board, and we'd give a monetary value for an approval for a refund. So, yeah, I think you clarified it pretty well.
So questions, comments about the policy or the, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's some things we had to think through, even though we've been sort of doing it. We wanted to just make sure we were writing down the criteria that was in our heads, if you will. And certainly we always double check with Bolton Point too, if it's water related, to see, what information do they have about the topic. So that was already happening. And Bolton Point they know what we're doing. They're supportive of it. Any other questions or comments? I don't think we've moved the resolution yet. Would someone like to move the resolution setting the public hearing? Pam, is there a second? I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Aye. Next item is a request for a speed limit reduction on New York State Route 96 from the city of Ithaca line to Hates Road in the town of Ithaca. And we're suggesting that it be reduced from 45 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour. Would someone like to move the resolution? Pam and Margaret seconds. Questions, comments? Yeah, so yes, we did put in a request, but not for this entire section. And so we decided Sue, Joe and I had a discussion, and I think it was discussed at Public Works. If indeed we're ever hoping to put a sidewalk up there, it really makes sense to have this reduced in the area that we're talking about. So it's kind of a different request because it's covering a different area. But Sue or Joe, do you want to add anything to that?
Actually, couldn't hear the question, Rod. I don't know if I'm having the same problem.
She was wondering if we hadn't already done this request.
Yeah, we had done one last fall because there was a reduction request from the community after a tragic accident up on between Hates Road and the Ulysses Town Line. That request was denied. I thought we had captured that from the city line up. That slipped through the cracks, so it kind of worked out. Sue Ritter brought to my attention the corridor study, and we wanted to resubmit for future projects and pedestrian traffic.
Pam, did that answer your question?
Yes, and I see that, I see it as very different than what was just denied. I do think it's unfortunate that that was denied. I'm just wondering if there's any further actions we can take on that, but that's not on tonight's agenda. Perhaps we can talk about that at a later date.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Rich.
So I think that request is, I understand that the impetus for the request, and I think it's excessive for that stretch of road. I say that meaning that I don't think there's any way that they're going to reduce the speed limit from 45 to 30. I wondered whether or not it is more or less a strategic request and we're hoping for something in between, because the likelihood of getting 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on that road is on the road with that geometry is pretty pretty low, and I don't think there's really a speeding problem on that road either. Maybe I think toward the city line there probably is, but as things sort of open up into the 45-mile-an-hour area, I don't think there is. So what are we basing our request for 30 miles an hour?
Rich, it's somewhat strategic, and that is that it's hoped for at least the 30 miles per hour from the city line up to about Candlewick Apartments. You know, there's quite a few residents in there. The road winds still quite a bit. You know, just there's a lot of aspects in that area where I think 30 miles per hour is potentially a good idea. And also it would help when we put in if we were to put in a sidewalk, we might be able to narrow the sidewalk width, or not, I'm sorry, we might be able to narrow the road. There's just issues with drainage along there. So it would help if there was a 30-mile-per-hour zone. The remainder is really going to be up to DOT to make that call.
I agree. Does DOT typically take it upon themselves to sort of segment requests if they think that your request is more appropriate for one portion of a segment that you've requested and not in another? I mean, because I wonder whether we're
my understanding is
sabotaging our own request.
Yeah, it'll be totally up to them because they have their own criteria. So they're probably, you know, we're giving them our wish and we'll just probably see what they come up with given the criteria that they look at. Joe, is that about right?
Yeah, that sounds correct, Sue. I mean, there is a list of criteria. You can look it up, traffic safety bulletin on speed advisory for the state. They have that list of criteria in there. So I believe they will review the whole segment that we want the reduction, or the board, if they pass it in resolution, and review that. And they will tell you, you know, if they feel that the speed is appropriate in those areas, and they will reduce it in the areas that they feel it needs to be reduced if it meets the criteria. That's
okay,
my
I just want to make sure that we're not sabotaging our own request by asking for the same uniform speed for a relatively long stretch of road when it's probably more applicable on the south end of that stretch. So anyway, if you think,
I think it's just a recommendation from us, Rich. I think, like I said, they'll look through their criteria and recommend the speed. So it's just a request from us, or a recommendation for us of what we think we would like.
Okay, fingers crossed. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments? Rob?
I think this is a really good idea. I think that the road is very densely populated with a lot of driveways and steep grades and everything, and I think this is long overdue.
Yeah, some of you I know drive that a lot more than I do. So.
We do now.
Any other comments, questions? Margaret.
I just wanted to ask someone who's really familiar with this stretch, is this state-owned road that we're talking about?
Could you hear Margaret? Yes, it is state-owned. Okay, if we're ready to vote, all those in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Number 7 is really just informational. We've talked for several months now about using our American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, for infrastructure. We meet all the criteria. So through Public Works, this has been discussed. We just wanted to bring it to the board to make sure there's no questions. We have around 1.65 million, and the proposal is to spend it on Ridgecrest Road Water Improvement Project and the Forest Home Pump Station. It won't cover the whole amount of those projects, but we will use fund balance for the remainder. So the hope was that we would be able to have to bond for less by using the money this way. So Dan put together this. Dan, is there anything you want to add to? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's not really a memo, but the information in front of you. Any questions about what's in front of you? Dan, anything you wanted to say?
No, I think you covered it, Rod. It's pretty straightforward. We picked these two projects to try to reduce our bonding amounts. Yes, between the two projects, they will not be completely covered by the ARPA funding. So we'll be utilizing the benefit assessment fee and fund balance to cover the remainder of those projects.
And we actually have, so we're spending it within the time frame. I actually think you have to what, like 2024, right, Donna, to spend it, or does it have to be expended by the end of 2023? Anyway, we're meeting the criteria. So any questions? This was really, there's no vote. We just wanted to bring it to the board's attention to see if there was any questions. Okay, moving on to number 8, consider referral of an open development request to the planning board. And you were sent some information about that. There's just a brief letter, if you will, from Denise Kostich. Marty, I think you're most involved in this. Do you want to say anything, Marty?
The individuals came in to ask if they could actually get a building permit on this parcel based on it being landlocked and not having access in accordance with 280A. Town board needs to go through the process to review and consider if they would allow open development to occur on this parcel. I did have a discussion with Susan Brock earlier today about the longevity of this parcel of land, and we believe it was subdivided somewhere around the time of 1950, which was prior to our zoning being enacted in 1954. So it's an older parcel of land in the town.
So questions, comments?
I have a question. On the map, is it parcel C that's only connected by a gravel driveway to the Elm Street extension?
Did you hear
Yeah.
that, Marty?
I did. It was tough to hear, but yes, it is identified as parcel C, which is actually very confusing to label an existing parcel in a subdivision that occurred in 2010, I believe it is. That's some of the confusion that Susan Brock had with the whole packet that came through. So, but yes, it is parcel C, and there is an existing house. I believe I looked on the assessment department, and the house behind it was actually 1880. So that parcel has been in existence for a very long time behind the existing parcel asking for the open development. And I believe there's an existing driveway in the area too that serves that house that was constructed in 1880.
The parcel that says Catherine M. Amelia behind parcel C. Oh, sorry.
You have to really speak.
Is it the parcel that has the house on it is the one that says Catherine M. Amelia on the map?
Let me just look at the
Yes.
map.
Catherine, can you say it again, Rod? It's just really hard to hear you.
It says Catherine M. Amelia. It's behind parcel C.
It's the
It's
one to
served-
the north of parcel C.
Yeah, north. Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
It's served by the same gravel driveway.
yeah,
That's how they get in and out of there.
yeah. And they didn't have a building permit because they were built in the 1880s. So
Right.
280A wasn't an issue when they built it. So, yeah, but it might be when the planning board looks at it, maybe they'll just decide to add that parcel to the open development area, since it's another landlocked parcel right next to the one that's the subject of the request. We'll look at it some more, right? But that was just what Marty and I were trying to sort out, all these parcels and when were things subdivided and built. And it all happened a long time ago, which is why you have these landlocked parcels. Because it
And so the
predates our subdivision law and predates our zoning.
And the process is just for the town board to decide whether we want to refer it, tonight's purpose, to refer it to the planning board. Anyone, and we don't have a formal resolution, the minutes will show that, is everyone okay with it being referred?
I have a question.
Yeah, can you do a resolution just because town law 288 requires the referral?
Okay,
So
Yes,
I
we
think a simple motion to refer the open development request to the planning board would suffice.
we can do that. Rich, you had a question?
Yeah, I just have a question as to the future use of the lot. If we do promote an open development area, would it be subject to potential subdivision based on lot size and setback and all those other factors. We're basically just saying this, we're treating it as though it has frontage by granting an open development area by virtue of the driveway easement. That's it. Everything else could happen on this parcel from that point forward. Is that correct?
I'm not quite sure I understood your question, but you can set any condition you want on the open development area as long as it's reasonable. So if you don't want further subdivision, you can do that. And then secondly, this open development area only dispenses with the need for the road frontage under town law section 280A. All the other town zoning applies in terms of setbacks and use and things like that, and yards, height, all of those would still remain in place. Did I answer your question? Did I cover it?
Yeah,
there?
you answered my question. My question, I guess I wasn't really asking it, but you sort of answered it in that we can set conditions. For example, I don't really know where this is. I'd like to see a bigger map personally, and I don't know how. It's hard for me to tell from these tax maps how big the parcels are and whatnot. But
I think parcels. Sorry.
Go ahead. At this point, we can refer it to the planning board, and then ultimately, do we make the final determination based on their recommendation?
Yes, it comes back to the town board. It's the town board that would establish the open development area by resolution. And Marty, maybe you can help me, but I think when we were looking at the maps and deeds this afternoon, parcel C, that's the subject of the request, I believe is 0.88 acres. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Parcel C is how big?
0.88 acres, not a little less than an acre.
Okay, thanks.
I'll move the resolution that Susan Brock just articulated. Would someone else like to second the resolution? Any further discussion or comments about this? All those in favor of referring it to the planning board, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Rod, we couldn't hear who seconded, and I know Paulette will have no idea for the minutes. Maybe you could just restate who
Bill.
seconded it. Okay, thanks. It's when we can't hear you, a lot of times we hear nothing, just so you know. I mean, it's just total silence. Just so everybody, you have to really speak close to the mics.
Okay. We look forward to when this isn't an issue. So we're getting new mics and all that. So mid-May, is that right, John? Mid-May. Okay. Moving on, this is setting, there's two resolutions related to noise permit applications for Ithaca beer events. So the first is setting public hearings regarding noise permit applications for Ithaca beer event. And then the second, just to clarify, is noise permit for 2 Ithaca beer events prior to May 9th, 2022. And we do have some flexibility to waive a public hearing if we feel there's good cause to do that. So that's why it's broken into 2 resolutions. So let's, well, first of all, does anyone have any questions? You also have the permit application in front of you. Any questions about the approach that we were taking?
I don't have questions about the approach, but I do have questions about one of the applications. Do you want to move the resolutions first?
Sure. No, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, it has to do with the application for canned music at the restaurant, and I guess what I'm wondering is, doesn't appear to be any mitigation listed on the application. No noise abatement control methods to be used. And it says here in a description of the event, we would like to play canned music over our sound system for patio, blah, 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 blah. Here we go. A demonstration of why applicant cannot conform to noise ordinance. We would like to play the music within the typical range a guest at a restaurant would expect to hear it, which prompts the question, why do you need a noise permit to begin with if you're only proposing to play it in that range? If you do they anticipate that this noise is going to reach a property boundary at some kind of a nuisance level, or they don't? So it seems like the application is a bit contradictory there. Because if I was just sitting there eating, I don't know that I'd want to hear music that was loud enough that they would complain about it on Peachtree Lane, but here we are. So anyway, those are my 2 cents. And I would like to have some clarification from the applicant as to what they propose to do, not necessarily in terms of mitigation, but what can they clarify the volume that they're talking about? Because if they're asking for permission to create nuisance level noise every night of the week throughout the entire summer, I think that's a really big ask. So that's why I'd like to get some clarification from the applicant.
Other comments? And Paul, Marty or Paulette, did one of you actually speak to the applicant?
Not really. I mean, he came in to drop off the applications. And I
Okay.
told him it would be 3 separate ones. I think they're just being careful. And part of the canned music or part of the determination of whether or not you even need a permit or a waiver is determining whether or not what they say is unreasonable.
So I believe
I can
this
ask.
stems from last year when the codes department received complaints. We made a couple trips out to talk with the neighbors up on Peachtree. And we also made trips out to Ithaca Beer. We made a determination that the music was too loud and was creating a nuisance at that time. And we requested that they reduce their music down to there's a digital readout on their audio equipment, so we could identify the range that was appropriate and put it in our notes. So I believe that this stems from that experience that Ithaca Beer had with our department, and I let them know that they could go through the process of requesting a noise permit for this.
Go ahead.
Sorry, having said that, I'd be comfortable if that range that you identified and agreed to with them last year was identified in the permit, so that they knew that they were to comply with that, not to just have the music as loud as the average person typically hears it at a restaurant. That's kind of an arbitrary metric. So is that possible, Paulette? Can we ask them to, can we embed that into the application?
The permit, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
into the permit.
Anything else that anybody wants to ask, that's what, part of the application is. Any further information the board requests.
So Marty, do you have that number written down somewhere? Do you have there?
Yes, we can
Okay.
we can get the number for you.
Thanks.
And you could just include that in the permit. So are folks comfortable moving this one resolution prior to May 9th? And that gives us a chance to also maybe see how things are going. So would someone like to move the first resolution, noise permit for 2 Ithaca Beer events prior to May 9th? Rick moves. Rick seconds. Any further discussion about the one resolution prior to May 9th? With the proviso that in the permit it specify whatever Marty had written last year.
I think this is a different.
Okay.
The first events that don't relate to the second permit.
Okay. If we're ready to vote, all those in favor,
Aye.
raise your hand or say aye. And then so it pertains more to the second one, the series and operational. Okay, so the second resolution. Would someone like to move this resolution with keeping in mind the discussion we just had? Rich?
I'll move it.
Okay, is there a second? Pam seconds. Further discussion?
I have a question.
Dan?
It's more for Marty. So Marty, when you turn the noise down to the acceptable level, was it loud enough for them, or do they still want to turn it back up?
No, they still wanted to turn it back up. So we made a determination what was acceptable based on our noise law. And so they would like to exceed what we identified as acceptable. But I guess you could, as the board, see what we as the codes department determined as acceptable, and they could make a proposal on what they would like to exceed to.
Just briefly, Marty, Do you recall what was the metric? Was it decibels? Was it some other sort of arbitrary number on a dial kind of thing?
It's a number on a dial associated specifically with that system. So it does
And then-
not correlate to decibel levels or anything of that nature. It's specific to their system.
And so here we have our dial at 5. Can you hear us at the property line kind of thing?
That's correct.
Okay.
So someone may need to do some reconnaissance again this year, right? When these start up.
Volunteers for that assignment?
Any further discussion? All those in favor of, we moved and seconded, right? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Next is a resolution, a statement of concern for the well-being of the Gaia-Kahono Cayuga Nation and support for formal letter stating the same be sent to the Department of the Interior's Bureau of Indian Affairs. As you may have noticed in the paper, other municipalities in Tompkins County have passed similar resolutions. We had a meeting to plan an event that we're planning for Tudor Park next spring, and I was asked by Station George if the town of Ithaca was planning to pass a similar resolution. You know that this is a federal designation. It's the federal government who chooses who they recognize as the leadership of the Cayuga Nation. Certainly, if you have followed the papers last year, there's been some events that happened up there that's raised questions about the leadership. So we tried to state the letter so we weren't overstepping our authority. We were just expressing a statement of concern. So there's the resolution, and then there's the letter that we would potentially send. And yes, we would clean up the letter. I was just working off from a PDF, so we'll retype it so it looks better. So would someone like to move the resolution? Margaret, is there a second? I'll second. Questions, comments?
I have a comment, which is the second resolve clause in the resolution. I think the letter's fine. I think the second resolve clause in the resolution that resolves that the town of Ithaca continue developing a relationship with the traditional leadership. I think that's a little bit, I don't know, it's sort of a thinly veiled swipe at the current leadership. And since we don't really advocate establishing or developing a relationship with current leadership, I think we ought to add that or remove this. Because I thought the whole point of this was that we're not picking sides. We're trying to prevail upon the BIA to investigate what occurred and to make the determination as to whether or not leadership needs to be reassessed.
Do you have any suggested changes to that resolve, or you would suggest taking it out?
I'm just going to move that we strike that resolve.
Can't hear you, Bill.
How about if we remove the reference to leadership and say we're want to continue developing a relationship with the people, with the Gaia-Kahono people.
Would that work, Rich?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. That works for me. I forget who seconded, right? Who? I know I was one of the.
Margaret moved.
You're okay with that change, Margaret? Okay. Other comments, questions, concerns? Mm-hmm. It's really because we're on land of the Gaia-Kahono people. I know we tend not to pass such resolutions. For me, the difference is that we're on the land of this indigenous nation and that we are working with them in different ways.
I can't hear either of you. Pam, you have to remember to turn the mics on.
Oh, thank you. I've been talking into it without turning it on. Can you hear me now?
No, you were doing so
Okay.
well, but
I just wonder, has there been any outreach from the Gaetano or, any communication from us to them? Any discussion, or is this just something we've read in the news and are
No,
concerned
I
about?
think I mentioned that Station George, we've been meeting with Station George because they're helping us plan an event we're doing next spring at Tooele Park. So he specifically asked if the town of Ithaca was considering passing a similar resolution that other municipalities were.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So if we're ready for a vote, all those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Next is authorization to submit a proposal. This grant required that we pass a resolution. So authorization to submit a proposal for participation in the NYSERDA Stretch to Zero pilot program. And so this will show commitment from the town board. The application, I believe, is due like the 21st or something. Nick and Marty will be, when Nick is on vacation this week, Nick will be working on it when he gets back. It would help, if funded, it would help give us some time to support ongoing implementation and enforcement of the energy code supplement. Marty, since Nick's not here, is there anything else you want to say about why you are supportive of us moving forward with the grant application?
I think Nick also possibly identified that it might help with amending different versions of it in the future. I think it is a multi-year grant, if my memory serves me correctly. So there's a couple different aspects to what the grant would cover, not just the implementation component of it.
So would someone like to move the resolution allowing us to go forward and submit the grant application? Rich, anyone want? Second by Rob. Discussion?
In the first resolve clause, there's missing zero in the monetary amount.
Okay, so noted.
It came as a Word document, it's a separate document, it's not in the packet.
And of course, everyone knows all the documents are on the computer in front of you as well. Does everyone know that? I may have missed that step. So all the documents are loaded on the computer. So even things that get sent out last minute, this is great that you can just click on and see.
Wait, Rod, the last minute thing is this resolution.
Oh, this resolution isn't there? Oh, I'm sorry. I know we put it together before Nick left, so I apologize that it's not there. Any other questions? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. To consent agenda. Would someone like to move the consent agenda? Eric moves. Second. Pam seconds. All those in favor of the consent agenda, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. You got the correspondence. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this. Since we're meeting in person, if anyone wants to look at the abstracts, I should have done this before the consent agenda. There, Margaret's holding up the, so we'll get back to folks can review those. And also the correspondence file, I think, is somewhere around. Bill, did you have the? Okay, so now that we're starting to meet in person again, some of you will be able to review the abstract. I just want to note that you also sent the end of the month financial reports for March. You received the code enforcement report. By the way, I don't know if anyone noticed. So I remember quarterly we give brief updates to City Council and County Legislature. So I did that last week. I only chose to, I left after I did my updates. City council meeting lasted 6 hours last week. 6 hours. So anyway, just wanted to note that. Yeah, public safety, I think, was the key topic. By the way, so I mentioned that we are planning a Gaiacono celebration out at Tudelo Park. We decided to wait and do it next spring. We've already received $1,500 though from a Tompkins County Community Celebration Grant to help toward that. So we were originally going to do it this fall, but we realized we needed more time than that. We're still looking for someone, a resident, to be on the Tompkins County Youth Commission Advisory Board. So if you know of any residents who might like to represent the board, the town on that board, let me know. Some of us were starting to talk about the new open meetings law. So let's just go back to that because some of you weren't here. So it gives us some flexibility. So we will, at some future meeting, pass a new law that spells out under what conditions would a town board member be, or I guess a committee member as well for a planning board or zoning board, participate from a distance. There's some flexibility now. We no longer have to give the address of a board member who's going to participate virtually and allow the public to go to that site and potentially participate. So that's good. We don't have to do this right away. I think it's 60 days before you have to start meeting more in person. We're sort of ahead of the game on that. So the good news is there's some flexibility. Margaret, I know you were asking some questions. Did you have some questions that this is going to be discussed at P&L to try to come up with some recommendations for the board to consider. And there is a draft law on Association of Towns site that I haven't really looked at yet, but I did notice that they have a draft law that folks can start from. So Margaret, did you have specific questions about this?
No, but I'll be watching.
And you're on P&O anyway, right? Yeah, so that's where it'll be. Yeah, I know you couldn't hear Margaret, right? Is that what you? She's on P&O, so she'll be part of the discussion as we come up with some suggestions. So other reports, things to mention this evening. I want to thank John for helping. Well, John and Jake set up all the computers and got everything preloaded. So it's pretty neat. If you forget something, you can just call up a document. I think this will be great. I know that Sue was excited from a planning board perspective for maps, that everyone can just pull up a map and look at it on their screen. I was concerned that they were going to be too tall and the public could see us, but you see they lean back. So when we do have public here, they'll still be able to see your beautiful faces. It's great. And John, thanks. Anything else for tonight? Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting at 6:26. Thanks, everyone.